Hey folks, one of your more common questions from the video 2 days ago where I was asking where we can fill in the gaps was for you to hear more about the past events, what ancient civilizations we're talking about, and to hear more from some of the other experts in the field. So, here you go.
Many astronomers, physicists have hypothesized, that at one time there was an immense solar outburst from the sun, maybe 100,000 times what it is right now. Tommy Gold was one of the first to suggest this hypothesis, and it has been followed up by other people. So many physicists, many astronomers believe that in the past, millennia ago, there was an intense solar outburst, and so I'm going to pursue that.
One that I have been focused on lately has been the antediluvian, the so-called biblical flood, if you will. On average, about every 10,000 years, you can expect a catastrophe to happen. For the most part, the civilization is wiped out. It's a horrendous catastrophe. It wipes out a pre-existing civilization and most of the people on Earth. And so we must start anew.
Probably 90%, maybe more, of the glass on the moon is from meteoritic impact or from volcanism on the moon. Probably. There is unquestionably these classes of glasses that are not from volcanoes and that are not from meteorite impacts, specifically the ones that have aluminum-26. The relativistic temperature required for that would require a meteor that to hit the moon big enough such that we would no longer have a moon.
There's two events happening here. When the sun novas, the heat from that nova and also cosmic rays, we get within 8 minutes of when the sun novas. Now remember, for another 17 to 18 hours, that dust shell is still on the way. It hasn't hit until, I estimate, 17 to 18 hours after the nova. So the first thing happens is the surface is going to get melted and glazed. Ironically, the Torah winds up saying the moon turned red. Well, yeah, it turned red. It just got baked and melted. That's the glazing that Thomas Gold and others had noticed all around the place. Then the dust shell hits 17, 18 hours later. Several assumptions. One, you can't assume that this dust shell is homogeneous because the evidence we've seen both on the Earth and on the Moon, they have the different samples they brought back from Apollo 11, 16, 17, a few others. They had different chemical compositions. The same stuff they found in the South Pole and other places on the Earth. So when they say it impacts like another meteor, remember, these scientists can't think in terms of the sun noving. What I'm trying to tell everybody, this is not an easy process that happens. It's a complicated one. It's not just the sun. It's not just that the Earth stops its rotation and the oceans keep going. It's also the crust of the Earth, just like the oceans, are going to start banging up against each other. So after the moon gets glazed by and melted by the sun's nova, 17, 18 hours later, the dust shell comes and puts a fresh new load of dust on top of it. I mean, they're grasping for straws because they don't know where else or how else to explain it. Here they get a sample, matter in their hand, and they got a bunch of holes in it. A lot of the samples they're getting from Antarctica and other places, they don't know to try to get the fission tracks. Look for fission tracks. The stuff that came back from the moon in 69 and through the 70s, they were smart enough to look for fission tracks, and they found plenty of them. In fact, all the glass bead, almost all the glass bead that I know of, had fission tracks in it, and about 5 or 6 different radioactive elements. Aluminum-26, beryllium-10, a bunch of them, that could only have been formed from a stellar nova. You have to have relativistic temperatures.
When you have the onset of an ice age, of course, here's the conundrum. The conundrum is that you've got to have a very large, rapid accumulation of glacial ice, which requires that the climate be cold enough that ice does not disappear through seasonal melting. At the same time, you have to increase the amount of evaporation from the oceans in order to loft this much moisture into the air that can precipitate out as snow that ultimately is compressed into glacial ice. The problem is, as you can see, is that it requires heat. So there's the kinds of conundrums that we're confronted with when looking at this. See, our predecessors from a few generations ago had it a lot easier because they could imagine that the whole process took 100,000 years or longer. We don't have that luxury anymore.
We call them excursions, magnetic excursions, which is, a term that's well integrated in the literature now. And these are very short-lived reversals, but they're associated with minima in field intensity, and it's the minima in field intensity that are implicated because when you have low field strength, you enhance UVR.
It's a little bit difficult to go back and to say, well, the story is not exactly so. We have the phenomena from all places, from the bottom of the sea with ash and with nickel, which is of meteoric origin. The terrestrial axis moved. And that paleomagnetism proves us that terrestrial axis, that magnetic axis, and possibly like Runcan and other of Manchester, claim that the Earth turned over. We know now from observation of Professor Danjon, director of Paris Observatory, that flares on the sun may influence the speed of rotation of the Earth, and there were sudden changes. We generally don't like to know that we are traveling on a accident-prone planet.
What were all these ancient people saying? What were all these people trying to remember? We must take the words left to us in generations of oral histories and written records of observations in the sky as instances of events that were not the norm. They were so important and unusual that they have come through time as warnings left by our brothers and sisters of the ancient past. These events were not lunar eclipses or earthquakes. Now in this time, with our understanding of celestial mechanics, atmospheric and geological sciences, we must try to make sense of these recorded events and untangle them from worship and prophecy. It's time to look at them for what they actually provide as a roadmap of things to come. We can ask the question, has the Earth stopped rotating for any length of time in recorded history? And the voices call out to us from the ancient Middle East. The book of Joshua in 1405 BC. O sun, stand still over Gibeon. O moon, over the valley of Aijalon. 1013. The sun stood still, and the moon stood motionless while the nation took vengeance on its enemies. The event is recorded in the scroll of the Upright One. The sun stood motionless in the middle of the sky. It did not set for a full day. And those same voices call out to us from ancient Peru. Also in 1405 BC, the 40th Inca Capac was Pachacuti, the reformer that started the worship of the sun god Inti. In 1405 there occurred a frightening darkness. Quote, good customs were forgotten, and people were given to all manner of vice. There was no dawn for 20 hours. After a great outcry, confessions of sins and sacrifices and prayers, the sun finally rose. Has the world experienced a global cataclysm before? And will it happen again? And what was remembered, and how is it described to begin again? The voices call out from the ancient American Indians, and this is the ninth and last sign. You will hear a dwelling place in the heavens above the earth that shall fall in a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. Very soon after this, the ceremonies of my people will cease. Has this cataclysm happened before? The voices call out from ancient China. There were seen fire-breathing dragons leaping into the sky. They call out from ancient Siberia. The earth was on fire from both horizons. And they call again from the ancient past in the voices of the Inca. At the Intihuatana was a stone cut with great precision to observe and measure the movements of the sun. The name meant that which binds the sun, and it makes it return, lest it disappear, returning the earth into a darkness that had occurred once before, according to the legends. Did the Inca, Chinese, Siberians, and the rest remember the last micronova event in their oral histories? We need to take these people seriously
The entire topic of catastrophe was umbrellaed under Charles Hapgood's absurd version, where 7-degree tilts happen randomly and over 1,000 years, and never tilted back to put the poles in their original positions. This concept was easily debunked, and there went the field of study. However, the previous versions to Hapgood's, Vogt's rotation change, Major White's insider version, and the Chan-Thomas classified version all put the poles in the same places over millions of years. Furthermore, the most highly cited work on past pole positions, which was used to debunk Hapgood's work, and which was used to crush the field of catastrophes as a whole, actually has a correction paper published, which was cited far, far less often, and which nobody really remembers. But it changed the past pole positions from the original publication, in some cases to the point where the original paper had them on the opposite side of the planet, as wrong as you can be with a polar search. Another of the well-cited papers debunking the polar motion came from a bachelor's student at Columbia. While in theory, a major paper does not require a major degree. This student worked under the CIA-controlled programs at Columbia, at the time when it was becoming so rampant and overbearing that the local community had begun an uproar. This is how you control a scientific theory. Whether we further investigate the problem of the poles in the past or we cling to the concepts that don't require them. The only reason this topic is considered pseudoscience is because a wildly mutated version of the story was put out by a CIA agent masquerading as a professor, and which somehow overthrew the centuries of study and literally the world of evidence.
One of the things that you and I have been talking about are the idea of these micronova events on the sun, these periodic cyclical eruptions on many stars based on the Kepler-2 satellite data. And that as this stuff is sprayed out into the universe around in our solar system, and these things could have been blasted out from the sun in these periodic explosions, and that could have been deposited on the moon, on Earth, on Mars. The fact that they're only about 12 miles down indicates they're not deep penetrator meteor impacts. So it leads me now to believe that these magnetic anomalies, if not all of them, certainly some of them, could be from solar eruptions. And this is just solar material that has splattered out and these planets have run into in this huge cloud of debris once the sun releases these nova events.
The U.S. government knows some of this stuff. They know the sun does nova. There's no debate about that. The question is they don't want you guys to know about it. If it's no longer a secret, there's no point in keeping it a secret. They're desperately looking for any other explanation. Don't look at the sun. That's it.
Another thing, we didn't even get a chance to talk really much about Mars. There's direct evidence of a major crustal shift on Mars. There are these magnetic anomalies that are geometrically perfect matches for some of the famous volcanoes there, but they're not geographic matches. They're not in the same place, almost as though the volcanoes and these magnetic anomalies once did line up, but after a crustal shift, they didn't anymore. This really could have been a 6-hour documentary. There is a lot still to do. We're not going anywhere, and a lot of the people that we heard from in this documentary, they are on board, continuing to do research, committed to do the research. Many of them are coming to Observing the Frontier 2020, where a lot of the updates and new information will come out. Really, this is just the beginning of the story of the end.